I was trapped in my college dorm with a malevolent spirit. The first time I felt it, I was alone in my dorm room late at night. The campus was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hyper aware at every creak and whisper. My roommate, Jake, had gone home for the weekend, leaving me to enjoy the solitude. Or so I thought. It started with a cold draft, unusual for the middle of September. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the old building's poor insulation. But then, the temperature dropped further, and I could see my breath misting in the air. I pulled my blanket tighter around me, trying to focus on my textbook. The words blurred together as my mind wandered, unease creeping in. A sudden knock on the door made me jump. I glanced at the clock. 2:13 a.m. Who could it be at this hour? I hesitated, and got up to answer. The hallway was empty, the fluorescent lights flickering ominously. I stepped out, looking both ways, but there was no one in sight. Just as I was about to close the door, I heard a faint whisper, almost like a sigh, coming from the end of the corridor. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. I quickly shut the door and locked it, my heart pounding. Back in the room, I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched. I turned on all the lights, hoping to banish the shadows that seemed to cling to the corners. As I settled back in my chair, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to navigate. The air grew colder, and I felt a presence. Something malevolent and ancient, pressing down on me. I heard a soft, sinister laugh echoing around the room. My phone's light flickered, and I saw a shadow move across the wall, not cast by anything I could see. The laugh grew louder, more mocking. I backed into a corner, my breath coming in short gasps. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The laugh stopped abruptly, replaced by a chilling silence. Then, a voice, cold and hollow, filled the room. "You shouldn't have stayed alone," it said. "Now you're mine." I stood frozen in the corner, my mind racing. The voice had come from nowhere and everywhere at once. My phone's flashlight flickered again, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I had to get out of there, but my legs felt like a weed. Summoning all my courage, I made a dash for the door. Just as I reached for the handle, it slammed shut with a force that sent me stumbling backward. The sinister laugh echoed again, louder this time, reverberating through the room. "You can't leave," the voice hissed. "This is my domain." I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. The temperature continued to drop, and I could see frost forming on the windows. My breath came out in ragged gasps, each exhale a visible puff of mist. I had to think, had to find a way to fight back. Desperation drove me to my desk, where I rummaged through my drawers for anything that could help. My fingers closed around the small silver crucifix my grandmother had given me. I held it up, hoping it would offer some protection. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice cracking. The room fell silent, the oppressive presence seeming to retreat slightly. I took a tentative step forward, the crucifix held out in front of me like a shield. For a moment, it seemed to work. The air grew warmer and the shadows receded. But then, the voice returned, more menacing than before. "I won't save you," it sneered. "You belong to me now." The lights flickered back on, revealing a figure standing in the middle of the room. It was a man, or at least it had been once. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale and translucent. He wore tattered clothes that looked centuries old, and his mouth twisted into a cruel smile. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "I am the spirit of this place," he replied, "bound here by a curse long forgotten. And now, you're part of it." I felt a chill run down my spine. The stories about the old dorm being haunted had always seemed like silly rumors, but now I was living the nightmare. I had to find a way to break the curse, to free myself from this malevolent spirit's grasp. "Why me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You are alone," he said simply. Now, you will never be alone again. The room began to spin, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I clutched the crucifix tighter, praying for strength. I couldn't let this spirit win. I had to find a way to escape, to break the curse, and reclaim my life. The room continued to spin, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I clutched the crucifix tighter, praying for strength. I couldn't let this spirit win. I had to find a way to escape, to break the curse, and reclaim my life. I forced myself to take a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The spirit watched me with those hollow eyes, a twisted smile playing on its lips. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. How did I break the curse? I asked, my voice trembling. The spirit's smile widened. There's a way, it said, that comes at a great cost. What cost? I commanded, desperation creeping into my voice. You must find the source of the curse, the spirit replied. An object hidden within these walls that binds me to this place. Destroy it, and you will be free. I nodded, determination replacing my fear. Where do I start? The spirit's eyes glinted with something that might have been amusement. The basement, it said, but beware, for the path is fraught with danger. With that, the spirit vanished, leaving me alone in the room. The temperature began to rise, and the oppressive presence lifted slightly. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, then grabbed my phone and a flashlight. I had to find this cursed object and destroy it, no matter what. I made my way to the door, half expecting it to slam shut again. But it opened easily, and I stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my footsteps echoing off the walls. I headed for the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The basement was a place few students ever ventured. It was rumored to be haunted, and now I knew why. As I descended the stairs, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around me. I reached the bottom and shone my flashlight around, revealing a long, narrow corridor lined with old storage rooms. I took a deep breath and started down the corridor, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew was overpowering. I tried to ignore the feeling of being watched, focusing instead on finding the cursed object. I checked each room one by one, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Just old furniture, broken equipment, and forgotten belongings. Frustration began to set in, and I wondered if the spirit had been toying with me. Then, at the end of the corridor, I found a door that was different from the others. It was made of heavy, dark wood. It looked much older than the rest. I reached for the handle, but it was locked. I searched the nearby rooms for anything that could help, and eventually found a rusty old key hidden in a drawer. With a sense of foreboding, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was small and cramped, filled with strange, ancient artifacts. My flashlight beam landed on a dusty old chest in the corner. I approached it cautiously, my heart racing. As I opened the chest, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight. I fumbled to turn it back on, and when I did, I saw the object that had been causing all this misery. It was a small, ornate box, covered in strange symbols. I reached out to touch it, but a voice stopped me. Don't, it said, and I turned to see the spirit standing in the doorway. Once you touch it, there's no turning back. I hesitated, but then I remembered the spirit's words. Destroy the object, and I would be free. I steeled myself and grabbed the box. The moment I did, a wave of darkness washed over me, and I felt the spirit's presence grow stronger. You've made your choice, the spirit said, its voice echoing in my mind. Now, you must face the consequences. I knew I had to act quickly. I took the box and ran back up the stairs, the spirit's laughter echoing behind me. I reached my dorm room and grabbed a hammer from my toolbox. With a deep breath, I raised the hammer and brought it down on the box. The moment the hammer struck, a blinding light filled the room, and I felt a surge of energy. The box shattered, and the spirit let out a scream of rage. The light grew brighter, and I felt myself being lifted off the ground. Where the light finally faded, I found myself lying on the floor, the shattered remains of the box scattered around me. The room was warm again, and the oppressive presence was gone. I had done it. I had broken the curse. But as I lay there, catching my breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The spirit was gone, but I could still feel its presence lingering at the edges of my mind. I had freed myself from the curse, but at what cost? As I lay there, catching my breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The spirit was gone, but I could still feel its presence lingering at the edges of my mind. I had freed myself from the curse, but at what cost? The days that followed were a blur. I tried to return to my normal routine, but the memory of that night haunted me. I couldn't concentrate in class, and I found myself avoiding my dorm room as much as possible. When I did have to go back, I kept all the lights on and never stayed alone for long. Jake noticed the change in me. "Hey man, are you okay?" He asked one evening as we sat in the common room. "You've been acting really weird lately." I forced a smile. "Yeah, just stressed about exams," I lied. I couldn't tell him the truth. He'd think I was crazy. But the truth was, I wasn't okay. The spirit's presence was still with me, a constant, nagging sensation at the back of my mind. I started having nightmares, vivid and terrifying. In them, the spirit would appear, taunting me, reminding me that I was never truly free. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat, the spirit's voice echoing in my ears. "You can't escape me," it whispered. "I am a part of you now." I sat up, my heart pounding. I had to do something. I couldn't live like this. I decided to visit the campus library, hoping to find some answers. Maybe there was a way to banish the spirit for good. The library was nearly empty when I arrived. I headed to the section on the paranormal and began searching through the dusty old books. Hours passed and I found nothing useful. Frustration and despair began to set in. Just as I was about to give up, I stumbled upon an old leather-bound book tucked away on a high shelf. The title was faded, but I could make out the words, "Ancient Curses," and how to break them. My heart raced as I opened it and began to read. The book was filled with stories of curses and spirits, much like the one I was dealing with. I skimmed through the pages until I found a section on malevolent spirits bound to objects. According to the book, destroying the object wasn't always enough. Sometimes the spirit could attach itself to the person who destroyed it. My blood ran cold as I read the next part. To vanish the spirit, I would need to perform a ritual. It required specific ingredients and had to be done at the exact time the curse was originally cast. I had no idea when that was, but I knew I had to try. The ritual called for a mixture of herbs, a silver dagger, and a personal item from the spirit's past. I had no idea where to find these things, but I was determined to try. I made a list and set out to gather the ingredients. The herbs were easy enough to find at a local apothecary. The silver dagger was more challenging, but I managed to find one at an antique shop. The personal item from the spirit's past was the hardest part. I had no idea what it could be or where to find it. I returned to my dorm room, feeling defeated. As I sat on my bed, I noticed something glinting in the corner of the room. There was a small silver locket, half buried under a pile of old papers. I picked it up and examined it. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman. Could this be the personal item I needed? I decided to take a chance. I gathered the ingredients and prepared for the ritual. The book said it had to be done at midnight, so I waited, my heart pounding with anticipation. When the clock struck 12, I began the ritual. I lit the herbs and placed the locket in the center of the circle I had drawn on the floor. I held the silver dagger above it and began to recite the incantation from the book. The air grew cold and the room filled with a dark, oppressive energy. I felt the spirit's presence growing stronger, but I kept going, my voice steady. As I finished the incantation, I plunged the dagger into the locket. A blinding light filled the room, and I felt a surge of energy. The spirit let out a scream of rage, and I felt it being pulled away from me. The light grew brighter, and I felt myself being lifted off the ground. When the light finally faded, I found myself lying on the floor, the locket shattered beside me. The room was warm again, and the oppressive presence was gone. I had done it. I had banished the spirit. I lay there for a moment, catching my breath. The nightmare was finally over. I was free. I lay there for a moment, catching my breath. The nightmare was finally over. I was free. The days that followed were a blur of relief and disbelief. I couldn't quite believe that the spirit was truly gone. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. My nightmares ceased, and the oppressive presence that had haunted me was no more. Jake noticed the change in me. "You seem better," he said one evening as we sat in the common room. "Whatever was bothering you, it looks like you've finally shaken it off." I smiled genuinely this time. "Yeah, I think I have." Life slowly returned to normal. I focused on my studies, spent time with friends, and even started enjoying my time in the dorm again. The memory of the spirit and the curse began to fade, becoming just another strange chapter in my life. But then, one night, something happened that made me question everything. I was lying in bed, drifting off to sleep, when I heard a faint whisper. My eyes snapped open, and I sat up, straining to listen. The room was dark and silent, but the whisper came again, clearer this time. "You can't escape me." My heart pounded in my chest. I reached for the light switch, flooding the room with light. There was nothing there, just the familiar sight of my dorm room. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It was just my imagination, I told myself. The spirit was gone. But the whisper continued, growing louder and more insistent. "You belong to me." I jumped out of bed, my mind racing. I had performed the ritual, banished the spirit. How could it still be here? I grabbed the silver dagger from my desk, holding it out in front of me like a talisman. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. The room grew colder and the shadows seemed to deepen. I felt the spirit's presence, stronger than ever. It was as if it had never truly left. Panic surged through me. I had to find a way to banish it for good. I grabbed the old book from my desk and frantically flipped through the pages. There had to be something I missed, a clue that would help me. My eyes landed on a passage I hadn't noticed before. To truly banish a malevolent spirit, one must confront it in the place where it was bound. Only then can the curse be broken. The basement. I had to go back to the basement. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. I grabbed the book, the dagger, and the locket, and made my way to the basement. The air grew colder with each step, and the oppressive presence grew stronger. I reached the bottom of the stairs and shone my flashlight down the corridor. The door to the small room was ajar, and I could see a faint light coming from inside. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me, and the room was plunged into darkness. The spirit's laughter had echoed around me, and I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. "You can't escape me," it whispered. "You are mine." I turned to face the spirit, holding the dagger and the locket out in front of me. "I banish you," I said, my voice steady. "I break the curse that binds you." The spirit's eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and it lunged at me. I swung the dagger, but it passed through the spirit as if it were made of smoke. The spirit laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You cannot harm me," it said. "I am bound to this place, and now so are you." Desperation filled me. I had to find a way to break the curse. I remembered the passage in the book and realized what I had to do. I had to confront the spirit, to face it head-on. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, the locket in one hand and the dagger in the other. "I am not afraid of you," I said, my voice strong. "I will break this curse." The spirit's laughter faded, replaced by a look of surprise. "You dare to challenge me?" it hissed. "I do," I replied. "I will not let you control me." The spirit lunged at me again. But this time I was ready. I held the locket out in front of me and the spirit recoiled, its form flickering. I felt a surge of energy and I knew I was on the right track. Vanish you, I repeated, my voice growing stronger. I break the curse that binds you. The spirit let out a scream of rage and I felt its presence weakening. I took another step forward, the locket glowing with a bright white light. The spirit's form began to dissolve and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. You cannot defeat me, the spirit hissed, its voice fading. I will always be a part of you. With one final surge of energy, I plunged the dagger into the locket. The room was filled with a blinding light, and I felt the spirit being pulled away from me. The light grew brighter, and I felt myself being lifted off the ground. When the light finally faded, I found myself lying on the floor, the locket and dagger shattered beside me. The room was warm again, and the oppressive presence was gone. I had done it. I had truly banished the spirit. I lay there for a moment, catching my breath. The nightmare was finally over. I was free.